Hello, my friends. This is Troy Brewer of Experiencing Real Life, heard every single day on Bible School Radio, 91.3 KDKR Decatur, Dallas-Fort Worth, and on 91.3 KYJC Commerce.
Portions of KDKR programming do not necessarily reflect the views of this station, its management, or staff.
Prudent Money with Bob Brooks is sponsored by the Prudent Money Foundation on 91.3.
So what is going on with student loan forgiveness as we go closer to the presidential election? Today we're going to take a look. Stay tuned for Prudent Money. This is Bob Brooks, and you are listening to the Prudent Money Radio Show. Thanks so much for joining today. You know I do appreciate it. Well, we haven't talked about student loan forgiveness in a while, and college admissions expert John Hupalo is here to talk about where we are with that initiative. But before we start that, just about an hour or so before we started the program, we had some news come out about student loan interest rates. And first of all, John, hello. Before I jump into all that.
Hi, Bob. Yeah, good afternoon.
I'll tell you, it amazes me. I think about how there's so many different ways that they could make student loan repayments so much easier, but yet they raise the interest rates to, I think it's the highest in 10 years, at 6.53%. It just doesn't make any sense.
I know, Bob. I'm going to step back and go at the highest level, because it dawned on me the other day when I was thinking about exactly what you said, all the stuff that is in the air. But I think about this high school graduating class. They started their high school career in
so
COVID,
true.
Right? And now they're graduating into this FAFSA fiasco and the highest interest rates in a very, very long time. And then you go 4 years ahead to the students who are graduating, who started college with COVID, and now they're ending their careers maybe with no graduation ceremony because of world events. It's just crazy. And so I say a prayer for all of them, quite honestly. I don't know how they can be so resilient, but I know they are. And we also know that the mental health issues on college campuses are really kind of out of control. And here's the reasons why. You're right. Student loan interest rates are up over 1% from where they were last year. And so you say, well, how could that possibly be given what's going on? And I'll give you the quick thumbnail history. You don't want to know too much about this, but the Reader's Digest version is that way back in the ancient times, like in the 80s and the 90s, the United States Congress used to actually set a loan rate based on whatever they thought it should be. Had nothing to do with any markets. Like, it didn't matter where interest rates were. They just literally pulled numbers out of the air and said, and at one time they had a loan that was 8% while the student was in school, and then 10% when they graduated. They called it the 810 loan. So anyway, a little trip down memory lane for me. But for students today, the reality is it's a market-based rate. Now, you can argue if you like the market-based rate they're using or not, but what they're doing, they're saying that the 10-year Treasury note auction in May, which occurred just a week ago, you take that base rate, and then for the direct loan for undergraduates, you add 2.05%, and that's how you get to this new 6.53% rate. The news is even worse, Bob, for PLUS loan borrowers. The PLUS loan rate starting on July 1, that's the other thing now, we're talking about different times of year and what's happening, but all of the federal loans, the sort of anniversary date is July 1 each year. So every loan that's made on or after July 1, 2024, all the way through June 30 of 2025 are made at the same exact fixed rate. And as we said, for undergraduates, it's going to be 6.53%. But for PLUS loan rates, Bob, I hope you're sitting down, PLUS loan rate borrowers will pay 9.08%. Over 9%, plus a fee. So, the finance people who listen will say, well, wait a minute, aren't you supposed to say what the annual percentage rate that, you go to buy a car and they tell you what the APR is on your loan? That's a big deal. Well, because the Congress makes the rules, they exempted themselves. So for student loans, they don't tell you what the APR actually is. So they just tell you the interest rate on this plus loan is 9.08% next year, plus there's a fee of about 4.2%. So yes, rates are up pretty significantly, and this high school graduating class who went through the FAFSA fiasco are now going to pay the highest loan rates in quite a long time.
Yeah, it just makes no sense. Well, let's jump from one thing to another. Another thing that doesn't make any sense is the FAFSA. What's the status with that?
Well, Bob, before we get there, let me just give 5 quick strategies to what families can do if they have to borrow these loans.
Yes, that'd be great. That'd be great.
One of them is borrow as little as possible. This is not the time to back up the truck and say, gee, if I could borrow money, I should do it, and I hope it will be forgiven later, because it's going to be really hard, I think, in the future to have loans that are made today forgiven. So borrow as little as possible, right? The second is, this is really critical, no matter what you think about it, pay interest while the student is in school. Some students, the federal loans are called unsubsidized loans, which means the interest is accruing, and the family is given the option to either pay that interest while the student's in school, or to just add it on the end. So a student, like a freshman, can borrow $5,500 under the federal direct loan program. If they don't pay the interest in school, they're going to be paying 6.53% on that amount for 4 years, and it's going to get tacked on to the end. So I didn't do the math, but it's going to be over $6,000 in loan pay will be the starting balance of that loan. So families that can do this, pay the interest on these loans while the student is in school. An obvious one, go and find some scholarships to try to reduce the amount of loans that you have to take out. MyCollegeCorner.com, we have a free scholarship search engine there. You can go and look for some scholarships there. The fourth one is use these tuition payment plans. These tuition payment plans are basically companies, and all the schools are associated with one of these companies. And they'll basically say, why don't you let the company make a payment up front on, let's just say, $1,000 to make it simple, and then the family over a 10-month period will pay $100 a month. So a lot of families will say, now that the student's gone off to college, I have a little bit more disposable income. A great way to reduce the student loan by about $1,000. So I would look at that. And then the last piece is just compare, particularly with the plus loans. If one of your family listeners has a credit score basically anywhere 675 and above, but certainly 700 or above, they might do better in the private loan market. We're going to put some articles up on mycollegecorner.com about how to look at those different loans. But I think those 5 strategies for families that are looking at these big interest rates could actually help them save the total amount that they will pay on these loans.
Yeah, you were talking about, of course, I'm real familiar with this because my oldest son was one in the COVID years didn't have a graduation. And I was thinking, I saw an article that one of the colleges in California have called off graduation. So that will be 2 graduations in a row. Hard to believe, isn't it?
That's right. Yeah, no, that's right, and they're not the only school that's doing that. So it is. It's just it's a Christian radio station. I'm Christian. I read the Bible, and you hear about the plagues, and I can't help but think that these poor kids in these classes have been like different plagues have come upon them. I don't think they deserve it, but it seems that they're dealing with it. So hopefully they'll get out and school, get a job, and be able to move past this and look back and laugh on these days one day. I certainly hope that. But you asked about loan forgiveness, Bob. This is all related, and it's related because I talk to parents all the time who tell me, I'm going to take out a plus loan, or my child's going to take out these student loans because they're going to be forgiven. And, all this political, I'm going to say, nonsense that we hear, and now it's going to get amped up because of the election coming. And a lot of it really is just nonsense because, remember, you and I have been talking about this for several years. Around election time is when we start hearing about all these loan forgivenesses, free college. It started back in 2016, and we're going to continue to hear about it. President Biden wanted basically to forgive just about as many loans as he possibly could. He was targeting like $400 billion worth of loans a few years ago. The Supreme Court said, oh, by the way, you can't do that by just signing a piece of paper that says, I'm going to forgive all these loans. So they, as a good politician, he said, oh, I've got a plan B. And so now he's unveiled his plan B, which is going to go into the works, and I'm sure and I absolutely guarantee over the summer into the early fall, there's going to be a big push about this new Plan B to try to forgive. They actually have a quote that I had to write down. It said that they want to implement this new forgiveness plan on a mass scale. Those are the kind of words they're talking about. So hundreds of billions, mass scale, automatically, so that the borrowers are not required to even apply for the forgiveness. So they're talking about this, quite actively now. And the program is under 5 parts. There's this idea about those borrowers who experienced runaway interest. Borrowers have been in repayment for 20 or more years. Borrowers who attended what they consider to be low-value schools. We'll have to see what low-value and runaway interest means, but that will all come out. Those who qualify for existing forgiveness programs, Bob, but didn't enroll, right? That there's a big percentage of people who never enrolled in these forgiveness programs to begin with. And then there's one other sort of catch-all that says that they want to forgive loans if it would cost the government more to collect on the loan than they would be owed. Which, maybe that makes good business sense, but whenever I read this, I say there's something else under that. I don't know, I haven't dug around enough to understand what they're really getting at, but that's the big drum roll from the White House very recently, that they're going to push this program. And already some of the pundits have said, hey, yeah, you can do all this, but by the way, you're going to have legal challenges just like you had last time. We talked about this in the context of it being political. And clearly, this is yet another in a long series of, I'm going to say, sad political sound bites at the cost of students and families. It's really kind of crazy.
It really is ridiculous. I mean, if you think about, he could say anything, free college, whatever. I mean, he can make it as spectacular as he wants to, knowing that, and he can blame somebody else for it not being able to come through, but he wants it, and that's just the way, politics runs. But I'll tell you, with families really burdened with student loan debt, and I realize, nobody forced them to take it out, but you at least think that the government could give a break on interest rates. That would not be hardly anything to do that. That a break. They're still paying it back. But
Bob,
2 or 3%, something like that.
There are a couple of things. If I were sitting in the White House, I would say this, which I'm going to say it, so I think it's a fair thing to do. One, I don't understand why any student or parent has to pay an origination fee to get a loan from the government. Right? Makes no sense. Over 4%. So they're right up front. They're whacking these poor, desperate, and by the way, the government makes 90% of all the loans made to students and parents for college. So they're collecting billions of dollars worth of loans, 4%. It's wrong in my book. The second thing is that I do believe that the neediest students should get the most loans, and they should be near zero interest rates for those students, like the Pell Grant kind of kids. Right? Maybe you do want to have a 1 or 2% interest rate on there, kind of have a little bit of skin in the game and not have excessive borrowing. So I would see that. But this idea of just like setting the loan rate once a year, the way they do off of the 10-year Treasury, that's a whole different situation. So I agree. And there's one thing I was going to note before, but I'll say it here because it comes right into the conversation. There are lenders for student loans, and they're usually state-based. I know there's a program that the coordinating board in Texas runs, and almost throughout the country, different states, where they're borrowing money on a tax-exempt basis. So that means that borrowing rate is a lot lower. And what those lenders do, those state-based lenders, they'll make loans to students that will be less than 6.53% and certainly a lot less than 9.08% on the plus loan. The catch with all that, and the reason why I think for parents it makes sense to look at those, is that they don't have the federal benefits associated with them, right? So for students, if you ask me who should take a federal loan, I say for students, that's by far the best deal in town, right? Even with this crazy fee, if I could eliminate the fee, I would do it. But take that loan. You don't have to start repaying it until 6 months after you graduate. So if you can pay the interest in school, if you borrow $5,500 a freshman, you'll graduate with a $5,500 debt. That should be manageable, right? And of course, you're going to borrow sophomore, junior, senior years, but so you'll get out around 25. The cap, most of the government will actually lend to an undergraduate is $31,000. That's it. So if you get out with $31,000 in debt, and you might be able to do it less than that, that should be a pretty manageable debt, right? That rule of thumb is that the maximum you should borrow should be a little bit less than or equal to what you think your starting salary is going to be. And most kids out of school now are making more than $30,000. So again, rough numbers generally, I think that's not a bad plan.
So there's been it's been in small chunks, but there's been a lot of loans that have been forgiven. How could a student find out if they were eligible for loan forgiveness, or if it happened, or where they really stand?
Yeah, it's always the number one answer to that question every time is find out who the student loan servicer is and call the servicer. Now, I'll give the Biden administration, the Department of Education, a lot of credit on this for some of the more recent forgiveness programs that they've announced, and they've been rolling them out. We talked about this month over month, $7 billion here, $10 billion there. Many of those programs are automatic forgiveness programs. So they made a change in the rules. Whatever the change in the rule would be, the servicer then runs a program that says, oh, this student now qualifies for this forgiveness program. And if you go on Facebook and Reddit and some of the other places, every once in a while, someone will post something saying, my loan was forgiven. They sent me a letter and said it's paid in full as a result of this forgiveness program. So many times they don't have to actually qualify. For some of the programs, though, it can be quite complicated. For one of the programs, the Plus Loan program, there are a whole bunch of different hoops that you have to jump through and the timing and all that. So rather than try to get into the specifics of that here, and I'm not an expert on the nitty-gritty specifics of every one of them, I would definitely go to the student loan servicer and ask if you're eligible for a forgiveness program. They should be able to tell you.
Now, I didn't get a chance to really dive into this article, but I came across an article. You mentioned the Parent Plus loans, that they're getting some kind of a break from a loophole. Do you have you followed that at all?
I have followed it, Bob, and it's one of those things where there are about 3.8 or so million plus loan borrowers out there, and there have about $112 billion of plus loans outstanding. And so what they're trying to do is figure out how they can make some of those borrowers eligible for these programs. So there's a loophole that's closing, and I think it's in like July 1, 2025. But the thing of it is that the parents can only have one plus loan in order to be eligible for this. So that means, and this gets a little complicated, but if that means if they have 2 plus loans or 3 plus loans, they have to actually consolidate those loans into one loan first. And the way the system's currently set up, they can only do that on paper. So they have to go through this kind of crazy process. So what I said before is call your student loan servicer. If you have more than 1 plus loan, call them. If it's serviced by the same, you might have multiple loans serviced by the same servicer, that would be great. Call them and say, how do I consolidate these loans? And then once you consolidate them, then you can go online and sign up for one of the income deferred repayment plans that are eligible for this forgiveness. So again, you talk about being crazy complicated. And this is one of those things where, again, we talked about this political soundbite. I have a program to forgive loans that are plus loans. Sounds great. get into the devil in that detail, and you have to jump through these hoops. There are loopholes that with closing dates. In this case, you have to consolidate first on paper, and then once you're on paper, then you have to go and have a new servicer and sign up for a new repayment plan and then ask for forgiveness. And all of this takes time. So I'm glad you brought this up. And again, I think the best advice by far is if you have multiple plus loans, you want to see if they're eligible for loan forgiveness, call the student loan servicer and say, how do I consolidate these, and how do I make them eligible for a loan forgiveness? Those are the two questions.
You know, it makes me wonder that when they're putting all this together, if they go, if we just make it hard enough, they won't do it.
Well, so, Bob, you're laughing, I'm laughing, but that's exactly what happened with the Public Service Loan Forgiveness Program about 12 years ago. So they put all these requirements that you have to have your employer do this, and you have to vouch for that. You have to do this on an annual basis. Then 10 years go by. They say, oh, this is great. The first group of students, they're going to be eligible for public service loan forgiveness. And guess what? Less than 1% of them were eligible because they didn't do all the things in the right steps. And now the Biden administration, I think now 4 years or so after that first group came through, they're the ones who went back and said, okay, we're going to fix this. Like, we're going to waive the requirement that you had to do this, that, or the other thing. Crazy.
Well, now we know, I think we can settle in on this, that we're probably not going to the status of free college for everybody. So that's probably off the table. But somebody's going to lose. Have you put any thought behind that? I mean, someone's going to really get a good deal because they're going to get some of that those student loans forgiven, but there's going to be a group that and going forward that loses. Have you thought about who that would be?
Well, I think the group, unfortunately, that loses is the group that was doing it the right way. So, I got out of school, I paid my loan, I paid every penny of it, and then the next month they say, oh, by the way, if you didn't pay all of your loan, we're going to forgive the rest of it, right? How does that? What's that message? That's what's always bothered me about these forgiveness programs. So I've never been a fan of forgiveness straight out for that exact reason, because I think there was a contract in place. By the way, there was a majority of the students who went through and did it the right way and paid on time, and they're the losers, right? What message did we send to them? It would have been a lot better if you had defaulted on your loan because you would have not made those payments, and then we're going to forgive you. So I have a problem with that. So,
oh, yeah.
You touched a sore spot for me. That's how I think about it.
Well, once again, if you bring my interest rate down to 2%, it makes a big difference. And that is nothing for the federal government. That's what's just so ridiculous. But it doesn't have enough sizzle to it.
That's right. That's exactly right. That was that commercial way back when. Where's the steak? Here's the sizzle. Where's the steak? And that's. I think you hit it exactly right. And I love your idea. Make those loans 2 or 3%. Maybe for the neediest students, they're paying 1 or 2%. And then for the students who they say are not needy, they're only paying 3 or 4 or 5% or whatever it is. But I don't do the math. So we know that the costs money to service these loans, and the government pays for that. But I have to think that they're making money on the federal student loan program.
Would think so.
4+%, right? They have to be making money.
Would think so. Well, John's website is mycollegecorner.com. Great. I'm glad that came out today. You and I got to talk about it a little bit. I'd hate to have waited. But, John, great to talk to you, and good luck. We'll talk with you next month.
Thank you, Bob. Be well.
This is Bob Brooks, and you are listening to the Prudent Money Radio Show. I don't know. Yes, my head hurts as well. It just makes your head hurt to think through some of this stuff. If you got a question for me, please go to the website at prudentmoney.com and send it in, because we are all out of time till we do meet again next time. Keep the faith and have a great rest of the day.
That's all the time we have for today. Questions or comments for Bob, or to find out more great information like what you've just heard, visit www.prudentmoney.com. Be sure to join Bob Brooks again for the next edition of Prudent Money.